wrong name again because I usually do. I've got a friend of the network here, Bastion, here to talk about Britonia, which is exciting. Ready for that. We've got we got some echo going. Do you potentially have headphones, Bastion, you could plug in quick?
Hang on. Bear with me. You do your intro bit. Yeah, I'm gonna look.
Cool. All right, so we got a full slate for today planned. We're gonna take a look at the Beast in Velvet. That was our Patreon book club. You know what? I think I'll just start over in a moment. If you're here on the stream, just bear with us just a moment. Every time we got guests, we got some kind of issue we didn't think of.
I'll just mute my mic unless I'm talking.
Alrighty, as long as you can hear. So, yeah, so welcome to Grimstream Perilous Lore. I've got friend of the network here, Bastion, here to talk about Britonia with me. We'll talk about, of course, what's gaming. First up, we'll take a look at Beast in Velvet, one of Bastion's favorite Black Library novels. A classic kind of whodunit murder mystery, which was really cool. I hadn't really heard of that one before. We'll go into that in a moment, and then we'll talk about not all things Britonia, but a lot of things Britonia. We'll take a look at what is going on there. So, first up, what's gaming? Have you been doing any kind of gaming lately, Bastion?
No, because I've with the quarantine, I've not been allowed out and no one's been around to see me. So I'm living vicariously through you guys now.
Well, that's kind of too bad that you can't do that yourself. Nothing online lately.
No, because we're Luddites. We don't know how to use technology. as quite clearly demonstrated by my inability to use this technology right now.
Well, we'll make it work as best we can. So yeah, on my end, kind of the same old. We actually did some recording for Settling the Southlands yesterday. That was a blast. Cannot wait for that to come out. We've done the first few episodes so far, and oh my gosh, the characters in that campaign are just amazing, and I can't wait for everybody to meet Liliana and Heinrich and Gertie and Bethan. I think I've mentioned them before, so little hints here and there about what's going on. Excuse me. Other than that, of course, here on this twitch.tv/professional casual network tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, we've got the power phase where Tim and Danny are teaming up against Taylor, Throwlash Gaming himself. They're gonna play the Ultron Ultimate Encounter, where we got two teams up against a super powered up Ultron to try to stop him from activating his Doomsday device. I think is the idea in that one. It's pretty awesome. So really pumped for that. But let's jump into what we're here for with Warhammer Fantasy and talk a bit about Beasts in Velvet. So we started in January a monthly book club kind of thing in the Patreon Discord where we kind of as a group choose a book to read. So far we've just done Warhammer Fantasy because that's what a lot of people are there for, and then talk about it kind of as people are reading it, they're talking about it. And at the end of the month, we got more. I was going to talk about it in the stream last week, but I didn't quite finish it in time, so I figured it was perfect time to talk about it with Bastion because this is one of your favorite Warhammer Fantasy novels, right?
Yeah, I love all of. Well, it was Jack writing under the name Jack Yearville when I first started reading his books, but Kim Newman. I love all of his books. The way he has characters running through all of them, like people from Drakenfels appear in Beast in Velvet and Ignorant Armies and Dying Cheng and people like that. I love the way he writes as well. But yeah, it's difficult to talk about Beasts in Velvet and not give anything away though.
Right, yeah, I don't want to spoilers, but there's so much going on. One thing I really liked about this one, at one point I was reading it and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many characters. Like, what is the point of this scene? Why do we even have this character in there? And then it makes sense later on, where I just love how it's just full of red herrings and full, like, constantly, like, okay, I know the beast is this person. Because the whole thing is there's this string of murders. They're all against women, often like women of the night kind of people. And there's all kinds of things going on. And all it takes place in Altdorf exclusively, and it's just constantly trying to figure out who's the beast. And there's so
Did you get
many.
it?
My first guess was wrong. My first guess got killed, and I was like, well, okay, oops. And then kind of who I was thinking in like second in line ended up being it, but the what actually happened was completely different than what my guess was going to be for that person. Did not see
Yeah.
that twist coming at all, and I was like, okay, that's very Warhammer.
I must have read it half a dozen times, and I've not yet noticed any particular call outs throughout the text that that points you in the direction of who it is. There's a
Yeah,
lot of it's like I was mentioned it just before we came on. I've got a very old white dwarf
super cool.
from well, it's issue 140 of the first edition, so I don't know what year this was printed in. 1991,
Nice.
and in this there's an article on the characters from Beast in Velvet. There's actually covers all the Black Library books in this article,
Very cool.
but the only ones they started them out for first edition. So like we have Filthy Harold.
Filthy. Look at that knife. That's not a knife. This a
That's
knife.
when this came out. Me and all my players all had a Magnin something. The steelsmith who makes his Magnin throwing knife, because we obviously love that. But they have a section on leading suspects.
Right?
So you've got Wolf von Mecklenburg, Michael Hasselstein, Leos von Lebwitz. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this one. I am going to.
The guard.
Etienne Edouard Vilches Comte de la Rougère.
Oh,
Breton-
the Bretonian
Bretonian,
dwarf.
so, Bretonian, so topical for today.
Yeah.
And Yevgeny Yefimovich. They were the people who were called out in that article as being the suspects that you should keep an eye on in throughout the book.
None of those were my first choice. I don't want to give away too much because I said something about my first choice. But yeah, overall, I really like this one. Really well done murder mystery kind of thing, and just so many characters in it. And they're all
Mm.
interesting. There were a couple that weren't that fell a little flat for me. There a couple of like the villains. The one guy that all he did was he said, "I'm gonna write a poem about this," like 8 times. And that was his entire character.
Kowalski.
Yeah.
But that goes back to what I was saying about Kim Newman. Prince Kowalski appears in, I can't remember which story it is now, but he's actually his character's more developed in another one of Kim Newman's stories.
Oh, okay, that makes me appreciate it a lot more then. So it's kind of like
Um,
sprinkled
so
in, and then he comes up later.
yeah, like Dan Cheng as well. He's only mentioned, but he's actually the antagonist in. Oh, it's got Vukotic and Genevieve in it. I'll drop them all in the chat later.
Yeah.
I'll do a little diagram for you. But so they're more like cameo appearances.
Okay.
So as someone who's just picking up the one book and reading it, you might think, well, who's this? Why is he even being mentioned in there? Whereas for someone who, if you've read all the other novels, you'll be like, ah, it's that dude.
Okay, I like that a lot actually. That's cool. So yeah, a
And
lot
it
of
goes
people
back.
complain about this being labeled a Vampire Genevieve novel right on the cover when she's literally in 2 chapters for a grand total of like 10 pages. But
That's just a
like,
marketing thing, though. Again,
yeah, for
I think
sure.
they wanted to chuck it into the omnibus edition, because originally it wasn't a Genevieve novel. It was, in fact, Genevieve only became the call out character towards the end, no, the beginning of 2000, I think it was, when she started getting more of her own stories.
Right,
She
yeah.
was. was Kim Newman's favorite character because she's also in another, or the I don't know if it's the same character, but similar character, same kind of attitude, vampire, is in another one of his different series of books,
Okay.
um, which is about vampires again, but it's not set in the Warhammer world. So she's kind of a port from that into this.
Oh, neat. Okay.
So she's like his big character, hence why then everything got retconned to be this is a Genevieve book because she's got her name on one page, whereas
Right.
it's technically not.
I did appreciate that the newer version of it where it's, credited to Kim Newman and it says writing as Jack Yovel. Uh and there's like a foreword where he addresses that and he's like, "Yeah, Genevieve makes like a cameo appearance in this just to kind of show what she's been doing in this time when I wrote this one." And it's kind of like, "Okay, I mean, I don't care. It's don't read it because it's a vampire Genevieve novel. Read it because it's a good story
Yeah,
and a good time."
I mean, I don't, unless it actually says Genevieve on the title. I don't assume it's a Genevieve, going to be a Genevieve book.
Right.
That's how I take them. This is a new development. I'm old school.
I would like to hear more about. She seems an interesting character, being so old, but not like a bloodthirsty vampire. She's just kind of hanging out. I like that. So,
Lamians for you.
right, I do like that bloodline a lot. So this is definitely the recommendation of the week, being a highly recommended. This is I wouldn't say surprisingly good because it came highly recommended, mostly from Bastion when we picked the book club book, and it was just a good time. I really like the idea of the outdoor fog where it's just this super thick fog that can lay over the city for days or even weeks and just bring everything to a halt. I thought that was a great inclusion to help with the horror aspect.
Two things Old North are famous for: fogs and mobs.
I like it. So, moving on to our lore focus of the week, we're here to talk about Britonia, which I feel like is a great topic to have Bastion here for because Britonia is highly. It's kind of like I've always seen it as a mix of medieval France, and England.
Mm. Think they stuck the Arthurian. Ooh, that's hard to say. Legend of Camelot. Let's call it that.
Yeah,
Into their pseudo medieval French setting. So
right.
it is a mashup.
Smushed them together to give it that Warhammer vibe, which I
Yeah.
love. I do. If you're watching the video version, I do have the newest map of Britonia for the upcoming someday, the old world game, kind of bringing back Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop, which is super exciting. But they first announced it and they said it's probably like 3 years off, and I'm sure that got bumped back with COVID stuff. So this is like the most recent glimpse we've had at this game is this brand new map of Britonia, but kind of ironically, it's brand new, but it takes place 300 years in the past
Yeah, I
of
was going to say
where
that.
Warhammer Fantasy battles ended with the end times. So there's a lot of speculation out there. Is this gonna like are they retconning like all of the history from 300 years up, which I'd be okay with if we could just not have the end times happen,
Mm.
because that I'm not a fan of. But here we can see Britonia lies to the west of the Empire on the other side of the Grey Mountains, and it's a large realm. It's probably slightly smaller than the Empire if you don't count Athelloren, which you kind of can't count as part of Britonia, but it's still a very large area that is known for verdant fields. They're really good at growing stuff. It's not as forested as the Empire, so they have a lot more area for those kinds of things. And this map is cool because it shows a lot of, who lives where. Tons of coat of arms, which you got to have with Bretonian stuff, right? And then also heavily, they're showing more of where other tribes are. Things like they pointed out a lot of where the beastmen are. Not beastmen. The green ones.
Well,
Orcs. That's the word I'm looking for.
how can you forget that?
Right? I've always got beastmen on the mind. I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit more for the video version so we can see this new map. It is really, really nice. I love the coat of arms of different places. See where these places are. Refresh my memory quick, Bish, and put you on the spot. What is the capital of Britonia? Totally left my head.
Is it corn or Brion?
That, yeah, Coron. That sounds right.
Coron.
That's
I'm
where,
sure it's Creon. Coron. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're probably better at the pronunciation of these places.
How I make fun out of you most of the time for the way you pronounce stuff. Well, now's your chance to get revenge.
Yeah, anybody's watched anything that I've done knows that pronunciation of anything, even if it's English, is still not my strong suit. As I teach science, I'll just make, we say, these names that are faux Latin for, or sometimes straight Latin for like scientific names. I can usually handle those pretty well,
Yeah,
but
but those words make sense, don't they? The way that they're laid out.
sometimes.
There's apostrophes and all sorts in these.
Typically, things like Latin binomials, you can just pronounce it as it's spelled and you're good to go. Whereas things that are like kind of faux French, yeah, it's a little more difficult. I've always pronounced that Coron. I don't know if that's right.
I'm happy with that.
Just a minute. I think it was before we started recording. You were referring to a city in the Empire as Ubersreich,
Yeah.
which I've always said Ubersreich. Is that river called the Reek or is it the Reich?
Well, see, I think both are correct
Oh
because
no.
there's I would say Reich because of the pseudo Germanic connection, but people also say they call the river Reek because it stinks.
I feel like I've heard that before. Yeah. Oh no, I messed up my
Um,
video here.
so I would actually probably say Obersreich is probably better. Sounds Ubersreich sounds better than Ubersreich. Um, but I really don't know on that one. I'm not going to. I'm not going to. It's not like Scaven and Skaven. I'm not going to argue the toss on this one.
Yeah, we put that one under the bridge a while ago. But yeah, I've always pronounced it the Reich or any like Altdorf used to be called Reichdorf. But I feel like I have read about the joke of calling it the Reek because it reeks, smells bad. Reek is very meek, that kind of thing. But yeah, so in Britonia, we need to, before we move on to anything else, we got to talk about one major thing that separates Britonia from the Empire is their major deity is not like the one that founded their land. We'll talk a little bit about Giles le Breton, who did found Britonia, but they don't worship him like a god. They just kind of venerate him as an important historical figure. But we have the Lady of the Lake. I think she's often referred to just as the Lady as well. And
Yeah,
this is heavily influenced by Arthurian legend, right?
yeah. She's who the. I know we'll come on to this later, but she's the holder of the Grail. The Grail Knight's quest for to receive their power. So yeah, she's their goddess. Then there's the Fey Enchantress, who's her herald, if you
She's like an
like.
avatar of the lady, right? More or less.
They are well. You could argue the case that she's an avatar, but they are separate beings.
Right. But she's like the
Or
power of the lady goes into like this chosen person, right?
yeah, yeah. And then from down from the Enchantress, there's the Grail Damsels, which are like your clerics or priests.
I always love the ideas of damsels. Here, I got a picture of them here, where they're the only magic users for the Bretonians. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that's it. Which I always thought was kind of interesting. There aren't any. I don't know of any male magic users of Bretonian lore.
There aren't because I mean I don't know how if they'll call it out as heavily these days, but in the second edition book, there's a lot on the topic of men and women gender roles in society in Bretonian society, as in women are there to be protected and looked after for their own good, and the men go out and do all the important stuff. And there are only specific roles that each can fill by law. With regards to the damsels, the Fey Enchantress travels throughout Britonia, taking children.
Mm.
She takes young boys and young girls, but only the girls ever show back up as Grail Damsels. No one actually knows what happens to the boys. So that's the
Hmm.
sign. That's one side of where it favours the ladies more than the
Right.
boys, I suppose.
And that's where it gets a bit Warhammery. Like, what happens to those boys?
Yeah, what happens to them?
And has that ever been covered in the lore? Do we as consumers of this knowledge of
No,
the lore, do we have any idea? Which of
no,
course it just leaves you.
it's not even hinted at
Oh
what
wow. Okay.
might happen to them. It literally just says she travels round. It's a great honor for a child to be selected by the Fey Enchantress and taken away to the other world or the realm. I forget what they're calling it these days. And people have realised that the Grail Damsels that come back are the young women, but no one knows what happens to the young men. Full stop. Move on to a different subject.
Hmm. Okay.
And there's nothing else ever about. I mean, if you wanted it to be a positive thing, you could say that they were living out on Avalon or whatever as servants or helpers, or she consumes them to feed her power, which is more Warhammer. Let's face it.
And that's my assumption is that the boys are sacrificed to give the girls this magic power, and that seems Warhammery to me. Like that just makes sense in this world. That dark,
Yeah,
gritty, just kind of
it's
like
quite scary that makes sense, but yes, that would be. I would think that, especially with them being Fey, because the Fey aren't necessarily good or bad, and they do things like that.
right.
So
Yeah, well, they wouldn't bat an eye at that. I totally forgotten about the whole they take the Fey Enchantress taking kids away like that. That just gives the Bretonians have this air of like we're the good guys, like we wear bright colors and we have are chivalrous knights. But don't ask us about where those kids go that the Fey Enchantress takes away.
yeah,
I
no,
love
none of your
that.
business. Mind your business. Move on.
Right, and that's what's Warhammer to me. That's what makes this world so amazing and has survived in in popularity for so long. Like they literally destroyed the world, and people are like, "No, we're not done with this place. You made it too good. You got to bring it back," and they have.
Mm.
So we're talking
I think
about.
I almost prefer. I know off topic, but I almost prefer the Storm of Chaos to the End Times
Oh, without a doubt.
because at least the Storm of Chaos didn't wipe the world out.
That I try not to talk down about it too much, but that was my number one sticking point with Age of Sigmar for until the second edition came out. For the 3 years of that game, I was just like, nope, I'm not gonna do it because it destroyed my favorite
Yeah,
fantasy world. They
I
literally
was the
blew it
same.
up. So I was
What
very
this no this does not exist to me. And then I think I stumbled across one of the books and I was looking through it, thinking, oh, this is quite interesting. And I was like, damn it.
all right. Some of it's really cool. I did give it a shot when second edition came out. They improved on some of the things in the tabletop game, but the lore of it's actually pretty neat. I do like the idea of the mortal realms and whatnot. I think there's a lot of role play potential in that world. I really like Soulbound, the Cubicle 7
Yeah.
RPG of it. I think that's solid. It's a good game. It just it
Uh,
ruffled my feathers and still does that. They to do that they destroyed my favorite fantasy world.
yeah. I had a lot of, I think there was a mixture of grief and Warhammer snobbery when it came to that.
Yeah, little
And
both.
yeah, and that's why, I mean, a lot of the lore from second edition, because the second edition of Warhammer is after the Storm of Chaos. So a lot of the Bretonian lore that we've got is from that time period because there wasn't anything in first edition apart from a little call out in the Gazetteer. And a quick aside, in the first edition, Britonia was absolutely nothing like it is now.
Really?
Um, yeah, it was basically a decadent, horrible place where the peasants are still treated like rubbish, but
Yes.
the whole knights thing didn't exist.
Hmm.
The king was called Charles de la Tête d'Or.
Yeah, I saw that they
Um,
use that name in Beast of Velvet a lot, and I was like, this. So this is where we get that kind of disconnect between like the novels and like the RPG lore and the tabletop game lore, where things don't always line up just right. Because I was like, is this
yeah.
guy before Leon Lewinker, or did they like just retcon
He
that?
no longer exists. He was Thanos snapped out of the canon
Right. So he
when.
was just okay, kind of like Leopold
So
himself.
say again.
Kind of like Leopold, the Karl Franz's son from the novels, because I know in
He's actually still there. He's in Leopold's Luterpold's in fourth edition. He's mentioned. He's the heir to the Prince of Reikland. Whereas the what's his name, the Crown Prince Wolfgang
yeah,
is the one that you keep hearing about
yeah,
because he's heir to the Emperor's son is still there. But it doesn't say what for. So he's been sent off to near Ubersreich. But he's still heir to the princedom of Altdorf because of the emperor is the Prince of Altdorf as well as being the emperor.
right.
So he has potentially two titles he needs an heir to. So Luitpold, and that's new for fourth edition because in the other editions the emperor's son wasn't actually ever mentioned. So now they have brought him in.
Okay. Yeah, because we had it might be going a little ahead of where things have been released, but with in Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure, hearing some rumors on while they're traveling on the Bogan, they hear about Prince Wolfgang. So then Tim asked out of character, like, "Wait, what about Leopold? Because he's been reading these books with us." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure he, in this lore, he's just not there." But I missed that bit of it. Is that covered more in like the oh, what's it called, like the Ubersreich adventures and stuff? Is that where we find out more about
I think
Leopold
it
and
might be an
Wolfgang?
archive. I think I might have read that in it's either in the core book or the Archives of Empire or the I'll find it. I'll find it and let you know. But it's definitely there. It goes through all the. In fact, it's in Archives of
Okay,
Empire Volume One because it goes through all the electors and who their heirs are. And I
right.
think if you want to find it in Enemy in Shadows, that's that same, it's different format, but same information is presented in there as well. I think somewhere, either
Okay.
in the main book or the companion again, and it goes through all the electors, how old they all are, what area they rule, and who their heirs are, and it's in that one of those two bits.
So Wolfgang and Leopold are both heirs, but for different things.
Yeah,
Okay.
Wolfgang is heir to the empire, heir for is the heir for the emperor, but the heir for the Prince of Altdorf is Lupold.
Interesting. I like that. To me, that's so Warhammer too, where it's just overly complex for no particular reason, and that's just how the Empire works. Like,
See, that's why Britonia. That's why Britonia is actually good. They have king, duke, peasant,
right?
no messing.
Easy
That's
peasy.
it.
Yeah. So go back to our lore focus after our little tangent there, which I'm fine with that. If we're talking about Britonia, you have to talk about Bretonian knights. That's just what they're known for, right?
That's all they've got.
They're brightly colored knights that are going to go to war in their house's color and with their heraldry on their shield, and they look resplendent in all their glory, and they're awesome. And I remember on the tabletop, a charge of Bretonian knights was terrifying with their lance formation rules and everything. And I just love what they did here with, kind of Warhammer. I don't know how closely this is tied to actual, like, Earth systems with knights in the past. I don't. I'm not. I'm certainly no expert on feudal history, but I love the idea that Grail Knight or not the knights, different knightly orders is the Empire. They began as knight errants.
Aaron, yeah,
All right, I always get it mixed up with which they start at. And I love these guys in the game because they were your cheap. These were like These will be the backbone of your army. So they had some awesome rules to kind of make up for their cheap points, where they were impetuous. That's how I actually learned that word from that. Where they would charge into battle to try to prove their worth as the lowest ranking of the knights, which is still a pretty good place to be in that society. And then what do they move on to, Bash? You want to run us through the different types of knights?
uh, well, all nobles are knights, and after knight errant is knight of the realm, which is basically where they want to be. Because being a knight of the realm means you don't have to go wandering around the countryside fighting baddies to prove yourself,
Mm,
which is what the knight errant essentially does. They go and do the errantry wars, and like you just said, with the impetuous proving themselves, they want to do that because then they'll get granted a position by a higher noble, possibly even like their father or something like that. They'll either be given a little bit of land to look after or be made a household knight. But at that point, they are classed as Knights of the Realm. So that is more often than not, if a particular noble isn't overly a fighty type, that's where they'll stop.
Mm.
That's an honourable thing to do.
Yeah.
You've done your errantry. A knight errant is a squire, essentially, but better than a squire because they're still a proper knight. To put it into context with the empire,
Okay.
but once the knights of the realm, they have the responsibilities. It's cushy life for them, nice life for them after
Where
that.
they can
Basically,
settle down as a knight of the realm and just
exactly.
protect
Yeah,
their area.
they've done their bit. They've done their bit. They've got their honor, their chivalry, and all the rest of it. They don't have to prove themselves anymore. However, if they're so inclined, they then become a questing knight,
I love these
which is
guys.
where they go and quest for the Grail. There's no rhyme or reason behind how this works, how long it takes. Different bits of fiction tell it differently for different knights. You know, some of them do one great deed and the lady presents herself to them. They drink from the Grail and they become a Grail knight. Others can be wandering for years. And I think I was reading it was the Malabode fiction, which he never became a Grail knight, but that's by the by. He he stopped at a Grail chapel at one point because he'd been a questing knight for absolutely years, and the lady had never presented himself. And the Grail damsel who looked after the chapel said, "Well, that's when you're about to give up. That's when you've got to carry on,
Mm.
because that proves that you're worthy of the lady." And that allegedly, then he was like, "Right, fair enough. I want to give up, but I'm going to carry on." And that's when he saw the lady. So
Hmm.
it can go either way: great deed or just perseverance.
Right.
And once you drink from the Grail, you are a Grail Knight, which is the big daddies.
Cream of the crop.
They have Grail powers. Well, not powers, but they're the knights in my best reference is obviously the role play game because I never did the battle very much. But they have virtues as knights. They audacity, chivalry, all different, and they give them certain bonuses to different situations. But once they get to Grail Knight, it's that bonus taken to a supernatural level.
Right. They're literally imbued
Uh,
with powers at this point.
yeah, because they've had it's like Leoncoeur. He's the king. The king
Hmm.
has to be a Grail Knight in Britonia. Um, so they have to go through everything before they can even be considered to be the king. And whenever he's injured, light shoots out of him until he heals up, demonstrating his Grail power.
I I never read that before. That's awesome. So he's just full of the light of the lady, and if he gets cut, it starts spilling out.
Yeah,
That's
until he heals up, you can see how pious and mighty in the powers of the Grail he is because he's just shedding light.
I love that. I like King Leon Lewenker a lot. I never fought against him in the tabletop game, but his rules looked disgusting. So when we're talking about Grail Knights, why don't we talk about him? So talking about those that take years, I was just reading that he did have to travel for years as a questing knight before he was finally granted his Grail Knight status by the lady.
Mm.
He was questing for a long time, but he's most known for riding into battle on the back of this awesome hippogriff,
Yeah, yeah.
which
What's his name? Boat
is it
champs or something like that. It's not that, but it begins with a B.
like BK or something like that? I think you can. I think you
Yeah,
could pronounce it Beaky if you want. The
yeah.
way that it's
I think.
spelled.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
That's right. Yeah.
I
So like
love.
BQE. I read it just before we came on, and I forgot it, but it made me chuckle. I love those puns.
It's the classic Warhammer jokes of the names. It's one of my favorite things about Warhammer, where everything is so grim and dark and serious, and then they have these silly names. Lizardmen I was talking about last week. One of them's called Tic Tac Toe,
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
and the one Carnosaur mount is Grimlock, which I kind of always assumed.
That was awesome. I didn't know that. I enjoyed that little fact.
Right? My mind immediately goes to the Transformers, the Dinobot Grimlock. It's like, is
That's
he
the only
named
good
after
one.
him or?
Must be.
Except they just spelled it with a Q to make it more South American. But King Leon Lewinker is one of those, like almost like demigod type figures in the world. Again, you can play as the king of the Bretonians, but you couldn't play as the king of the High Elves. I'm going to be bitter about that forever. Every other race you could play as their like overlord, except the High Elves.
Yeah, but he would have been so OP. He could just walked on and slapped everybody.
Yeah, what's wrong with
Like
that? He's a High Elf. He's better than
you
everybody.
want to play the King of the High Elves? You get one model in your army. Him.
Yeah, and he'd be awesome because he'd probably ride a dragon.
Yeah, yeah.
He just goes to war on his boat because he was Finnebar's seafarer, I think was his name.
Yeah.
I'll be bitter about that
Anyway,
forever.
there's only one true king of the owls, and that's Malekith. But that's a different topic.
Wow. Okay. Let's move on before we get heated. As a I was a high elf player for a long time. I guess I still am because I still have them on square bases. But my younger brother was a dark elf player, so it was always like, you know, dark elves were the enemy for the longest time for me, and dwarves because he played dwarves as well. So that's kind of how I roll. All right. So the last thing with knights, almost two more things with knights. Almost went over. We talked a little bit before the stream because I wasn't quite sure how these guys worked, even though they're awesome. Pegasus knights. Dudes with flying horses. Like, how much cooler can you get? How much more fantasy can you get than that with this knight decked out in these bright colors with his lance, super long lance, riding a Pegasus?
Until I was reading up, refreshing for the show, I'd completely forgot that they had the Pegasuses.
I sound like Tim now.
You don't hear him mentioned at all, really. But yeah, what was it they were saying? And they're not fussed. You can raise them from foals, and that's supposed to be a nightly thing to do. If you want to ride a Pegasus, you've got to raise it yourself.
Which makes sense.
But you must think then they must be quite common, because I think all the way through Warhammer roleplay, I've only ever seen mention of Pegasi once, which was in the Empire in Flames, the original last portion of the Enemy Within campaign. Other than that, and since then, even through second, they only get mentioned in Britonia.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming they must be a Bretonian thing now.
So I think I need to read into that a little bit more. I would imagine they probably only live like on the Bretonian side of the Grey Mountains or something like that. Because I'm sure there's Pegasus at the Imperial Zoo in Altdorf, but outside of that, you never hear about Pegasus.
Doesn't Carl Franz? Oh, I know he's got Deathclaw, but doesn't he also have a Pegasus?
I think so. I think back in the day there were rules for him to go on foot, on a Pegasus, or on a Griffin, but I'm sure he could ride whatever he wants. They have a dragon in the Imperial Zoo that's been mentioned in the fluff, so I think he could potentially ride on a dragon. I don't know if it's like trained to be a mount.
Maybe. He's the Emperor. He can do what he like. He can try to do what he likes.
Right, he's Sigmar incarnate, basically. He can do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
But Pegasus Knights...
Why not?
Yeah, it's fantasy. Do what you want. I just like...
Britonia is the highest, I think, the highest fantasy realm or land in Warhammer. Because it's all very grim. I know it's got its magic and all the rest of it going on all over the world. But with like the shining knights riding Pegasi, and everything, that's like proper, almost Dungeons and Dragony level fantasy.
Yeah, and it's just cool looking. I love these dudes. They were the worst thing ever on the tabletop because you could not put the models next to each other. When they would fly an inch apart, but when they got into combat, they still had to go base to base in their own unit, and they were units of 3. I don't think you could make them bigger than that or smaller. I think it was always units of 3. But you could not get the bases to line up. So every time I would fight against these things, the opponent would just take them off of their flying stands and just put the bases there. Because otherwise their wings just did not allow them to get next to each other. It wasn't great design.
Did the Bretonian army have any ranged abilities? I had a quick flick through the army book, the 6th edition one, saying that we said before, didn't we? That's the last one they ever did.
Yeah.
But I know that knights swear off ranged weaponry because they see it as cowardly.
Yes, they will
But
not even carry a
do they
ranged
have
weapon.
divisions of peasants in the armies also? Because I found the Bretonian army list to be rather lackluster.
Yes.
Personally, they don't have a lot. They've got knights, knights on horses, knights on winged horses, knights on feet. That's it.
Yeah, you could take a knight. The only way you could get knight on foot is if it was a character level knight that you gave him a special. I think it was virtue of the humbled or something like that, and then he could go to
Right.
war on foot with peasants. But yeah, there were two different units that the Bretonians could wield that had any kind of range outside of magic. That was the oh, what do they call them?
Yeomen.
Yeoman archers. So they're
Yeah.
just a different variety of peasant that had just bows, and then they had the everybody's favorite trebuchet.
Trebuchet. That's it. Yes, I remember reading about that because they are technology-wise they are quite backwards, Britonia, in comparison to the Empire.
Yeah.
So they're still using catapults and well trebuchets and stuff like that. Which I
Ironically, though,
like. I like the reasoning behind that.
yes.
Um, in one of the law books is because Bretonians live for the day. Um,
Mm.
so they look at it as if you're planning for the future, you're shirking your responsibilities for that day. You've got to, if you're going to do something, you do it to the full extent of your ability on that day at that time. The future does not exist. Deal with the consequences when it comes up, which is how they
Hmm.
explain why they haven't actually progressed any further technologically or societal wise. Um, Along because they're right next door to the empire, they engage with the empire, and yet they are hundreds of years behind them technology and society wise, and that's why because they live for the now. I thought, oh, that's nice.
Oh, I've never read that, but that makes a lot of sense and really helps to explain why this place is so different from places like the Empire that's right there.
It's in the Knights of the Grail second edition book.
Ah, yeah. I was just talking about before we were recording. I was like, I don't have the one Bretonian army book from like 2002, but I do have the Knights of the Grail and totally forgot to look at it. I was just googling stuff this morning to refresh my memory about things as I was looking up pictures to include and whatnot. But I love that idea that they're just backwards because they don't. That's interesting. They don't look to the future, so they don't develop these new things.
Mm.
So yeah, knights aren't the only thing in Britonia. We mentioned the peasants a little bit. So I got a picture here of the old Men at Arms box set. I love these guys on the tabletop because they were your cheap fodder. You could have units of 20 or 30 for as much as a unit of 10 knights. And they were pretty awesome because they have shields and they have halberds, which were really good weapons. But they were just your dirty, filthy peasants that were conscripted. They were like, "Hey, you got to go march for your lord," and they're like, "Well, I guess I have to, and I hope I don't die." And they weren't even trained. They were just given weapons and said, go defend your realm." So they were like some of the worst troops in the game skill wise. Remember they had weapon skill too, so like they didn't hit much and they got hit all the time, but they were fairly well armored because they're given shields, and then the halberds made them stronger. But I just love the idea of the unclean rabble kind of thing. I'm pretty sure this image literally has a guy with a pot on his head as a helmet, which again is so Warhammer.
Oh yeah, I can see. Look, it does look like it. Yeah, it looks like he's got a pad on his head.
I'm pretty sure you can see the handle of it sticking out the back. Or it
Yeah,
might just
off
be
you
the
go.
shape. I don't know, but I like to think it's a pot because that's funnier to me.
And it fits.
And it's just yeah, they would also mass them into small units of bowmen, which they were sneered at. They're looked down upon by the knights because, as you said, it was seen as cowardly. But they were like, well, they're just peasants. They don't even have proper armor. So I guess if they have to kill the enemy from afar,
Because
we'll let them
because the
do it.
peasants aren't, they don't expect the peasants to have the code of chivalry. They
Right.
aren't Peasants aren't bound by it. Only nobles and all nobles are knights, so only knights are bound by the code of chivalry. Just three things which I looked up before we started and I've completely forgot now. The one that makes me laugh the most, though, one of them I do remember, is the thing of courtesy, which is where, as a knight, under the code of chivalry, it is courteous to let your superior or higher ranking knight take on the foe that will offer the most glory. And
Hmm.
a bit made me laugh in the book. It says, and to see a group of Bretonian knights deciding who, giving way to let the to courteously let the greatest of their number face down the bloodthirster of corn is a truly beautiful sight to see. Because you can imagine these groups of knights going, no, please, by all means, you take him. You're much better than I am. No, no, sir, you're much better than I am. You go and fight him.
That's so
That was
awesome. They're just cowardice disguised as chivalry.
chivalry. Yeah,
Where if
exactly.
they just all went at once, they might actually have a chance.
But codes is codes. You know,
And so they're so
you know how codes.
backwards. Like, no,
Yeah,
just fight. You probably could win if you all fight it at the same time. Not one on
I
one.
think
That's dumb.
I think the direct bit is seeing a group of knights deciding who's going to fight something on the battlefield is such a glorious display of chivalry. It brings a tear to the eye, and you can obviously it's not in italics or called out as being sarcastic, but the way it's written is just dripping with sarcasm,
Love it.
and it just makes it clear that, like you said, it's cowardice dressed up as chivalry.
Oh, it's so good. That that's why I like Warhammer so much. Things like that.
That when they changed it from the way it was in first edition, obviously a lot of people came out, and because it was different, lots of people said, well, we don't like that, we're not having that, it's different, it's new. No,
Hmm.
this is what it says in the first edition book, this is the only way it's going to be, except so on and so forth, you can imagine. So there was talk on the forums of the way to reconcile the differences between what it said in the first edition and the way it was all now Gleaming Knights. Was the Gleaming Knights and everything is the public face that Britonia puts forward that everybody else sees, whereas the description of it being grotty, dirty, corrupt, depraved was actually the reality.
Oh, I love that.
I think as they developed Britonia more, that kind of became irrelevant because they did bring it up to be like nice and shiny and brilliant, but originally that's how people were reconciling it in like their own head canon about how to justify the change between how they'd been playing Britonia previously to how it was being described now. That was just a brief historical aside for you.
I like that idea though a lot. It makes me think of one of the shining moments of Age of Sigmar. People joke and say that Britonia does exist in Age of Sigmar. They're just undead. The flesh eater courts, which are basically all ghouls, their whole lore is I really legitimately love what they did with these guys where it's an army of ghouls, but in the ghouls head, like their names are like archregent and whatnot, and they have all these like Bretonian sounding names that they call each other because they think
Would make
they
sense.
are noble and like they see themselves riding to war as these, ornate knights and whatnot, but they're really these rabble of ghouls with bone weapons, and just like it's so amazing.
Other than orcs, the undead are probably the biggest antagonist that Britonia is related to,
Yes.
linked to, like Musalon, which we mentioned at the beginning. That just has undead randomly walking about because they don't suffer from instability or lack of control. If they're raised there by a necromancer and he just goes off and leaves them, they can wander around within the borders of Musalon till their heart's content, trying to complete the last order. So there's a heavy thing about undead in Britonia. So that would make perfect sense, I suppose, because I don't think it specifically mentions in the end times what happens in Britonia. I know because the Green Knight he comes back, doesn't he? Um, that's another Arthur call out. But I think I read it on a wiki just before we came on, and it was saying that whilst the Empire was being described in the fiction as it was falling, basically, the last bit you actually read about Britonia is Abrabash, who's the blood dragon progenitor. Is that the right word?
Oh, I just
The
read that
the
earlier.
big
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
was fighting next to the Green Knight, and they were just pushing. That's it. That's how it ended for Britonia. So yeah,
Huh. Well, that brings up a.
Completely fell off my train of thought there.
I mean, that was something I was going to talk about today. Was ready for to talk about the Red Duke, who is
Yeah,
the vampire lord of. He was originally the Duke of Aquitaine,
yeah.
but I believe he is now the Duke of Mousillon, right?
No,
Didn't he? I thought he
that's the
took
Black
over there.
Duke. The Black Knight is the Duke of the Red Knight. The Red Duke, last I read, has disappeared. He because he fought in the errantry wars in Araby,
Okay.
the Crusades in Araby. He was killed there, ambushed by um, vampires, raised as a vampire.
Oh.
He then came back to Britonia to Aquitaine, like you said. Basically, ruled, was baddie. Brother killed him, put him in a big, but refused to destroy the body like you would with a
Oh.
vampire, than you would with a normal vampire. He refused to destroy the body, so had him interred in a massive mausoleum, which the Grail Damsels put all this warding magic around it, and it escapes me now who did it, but a group of necromancers wanted some power from this particular mausoleum, came and destroyed the seals, which were keeping him restrained. He got out, kicked some ass, and then vanished.
Hmm. Okay.
So he's in the wind at the minute, the Red Duke. The Black Knight, Malabord, is Lewin Leoncourt's bastard son. And by law, the king decreed that after the affair of the False Grail, there would be no duke in Mousillon. But Malabord, who believes that the whole thing with the Lady of the Lake is fraud. He was the one I mentioned earlier about going on for ages trying to find this thing. And when he finally met the lady, apparently he saw something that made him realize that it was all a lie. It was all false.
Mm.
So he's now taken it upon himself to basically fight Britonia to say, look, you're in thrall to this Lady of the Lake thing, and she's a fraud, and we're not having it. So he's declared himself duke against the law of the king, and he's currently raising an army because the king hasn't gone to, as at the time of writing the law books, he hadn't gone to fight him, but that's what's on the cards, and he's a bad guy. He's the big bad basically of Britonia. He's raising undead armies and all sorts. So this Black Knight, he's the current baddie in Mousillon.
Very cool. So I knew that you'd be able to fill that in. I had things a little mixed up there, but
The Red Duke was a massive character historically, and then he just disappears.
interesting.
I can't remember if he disappeared into Athol Lauren or not. Or I think there might have been some hint that he was wandering off back to Araby to go and finish the Crusades in Araby.
Right, that would make sense.
I think I might have read something about that. I can't remember exactly because once I picked up on the Black Knight, obviously it said Black Knight, and that sounded cool. So
Yeah,
I
obviously.
concentrated more on that.
Tis a flesh wound. If you want to know more about the Red Duke, the image I have up on the video is of the cover of the book, The Red Duke by C.L. Werner, just without the text on it, just because he looks awesome. He's a blood dragon vampire, so there's very martially based, which fits perfectly well in Britonia because they like to cover themselves in armor and stuff too. Really cool stuff. I'm probably going to check that one out myself because I love the whole vampire stuff in Britonia. To me, I find it almost more interesting than Sylvania and the Empire with their vampire counts. I'm not sure what it is the idea of these vampires in Britonia that I feel like I'm more interested in that for whatever
They
reason.
seem, they seem, even though Sylvania's like the vampire country, if you
Mm-hmm.
like, the characterization of the vampires in Britonia is more developed. I've found in reading through. Yeah, obviously there's the von Carsteins in Sylvania, but that's about as far as it goes.
Kind of, yeah.
Whereas in Britonia, some of the nobles are vampires. One of the Black Duke I keep calling him the Black Duke. The Black Knight isn't a vampire, but he has many vampire allies. One of his
Oh.
nobles is um, which one's that in?
And even Genevieve that we were talking about with the vampire Genevieve novel, she is a
Who's from
Bretonian.
Paravon, which is in Britonia.
Very cool. Talking about undead with Britonia, we would be remiss not to talk about the just dead. No undead
The
about
lucky
it.
one.
My
The lucky
favorite,
one.
one of my favorite things about Britonia. I was just telling Danny about this earlier when I was looking up pictures, and I was like, I gotta show you this. The Grail Relique. Relique? I don't know how to say it. When a Grail Knight dies, and Grail pilgrims carry his dead body back into battle as if he were riding a horse and fight with him there. If you're watching the video version, I'm going to blow up this picture. It's I couldn't find a good like artwork of it, so this is the only model they ever made of it. It was a small unit with the battle pilgrims that are like fanatical peasants. They wield their shields upside down, and they have like broken knight weapons instead of their typical peasant weapons. And we have a group of them in the middle that literally pretend to be this dead knight's horse and carry him into battle. Just it's so amazing. It's so
How did they come? How did they come up with this stuff?
what? It's so dumb in a way cuz like how you're carrying this big wooden plank with a dead dude on it covered in his still wearing armor and like
Pretending to be his horse.
yeah, they even in the model even has one dude holding up a horse skull over his head so it's at the right height.
See, and it's that attention to detail that makes it brilliant.
It's so amazing. I can't remember. I think in the tabletop game they were like unbreakable. They would never flee from combat because they were so zealous about their knight. But there's something else about it where there was still some power with the knight that they could like they venerated him as almost like this demigod that fell in battle. And it's just oh my gosh, one of my favorite things about Britonia in general. I love it so much. It's just so weird. So amazing. But the last thing I
They
had,
had to give the poor Bretonian army something unique, didn't they?
yeah, right, something weird and out there. But the last thing I had prepped to talk about today, you mentioned him earlier. I think one of the most interesting special characters that the Bretonians have is the Green Knight, which is obviously heavily inspired by actual English uh,
Arthurian
mythology.
legend.
Right? It was
Arthurian. Arthurian.
Sir Gawain, the Green Knight, and then they gave it their own Warhammer spin on it. So he's really cool because he's the guy that he appears when they're most needed. We see this repeated here and there in some different Warhammery
Bretonian
things.
Sigma.
Kind of like Bretonnia Sigmar, very similar to it's called the Sanguinor for the Blood Angels. The same kind of like otherworldly, ghostly figure that shows up, who's like supposed to represent the pinnacle of the people. Like he is like the greatest knight, and he just comes out of nowhere as this like kind of ghostly figure. He's known to have fought beside King Leon Luankur a few times. When he
It,
went
it,
when hmm?
Giles, that's Giles Le Breton. He is the Green Knight.
So there's rumor that it might be him coming back, the founder of Britonia coming back as like this spectral figure. Um, but in typical
Well,
Warhammer
again,
fashion,
that's end times law. So if you want to treat it as canon or not is another matter.
oh, they did reveal in the end times that it was in fact
Yeah,
Giles the Breton.
yeah,
Okay, because I
he's actually like the Green Knight came back as a physical manifestation during the end times because that's when Britonia needed him the most because Malabode had actually killed Leon, the king. He
yeah.
killed him. So Giles Le Breton came back from Avalon, which is where he'd gone when he was killed hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They made him king again, and he marched off to start whooping. So they did actually reveal all of that in the End Times books. Prior to
Oh,
that, it was rumored and speculation, but then they've come out and said, yeah, that's the crack. Now, whether they'll change that with the newest edition, with if they're forgetting about End Times or doing End Times a little bit differently, I don't know. Um, But yeah, that's what happened with him anyway. But so that's why I say he's like the Bretonian version of Sigmar, because he was Giles the Uniter, who united all the Bretonian tribes the way that Sigmar did with the Empire tribes. He went well. He got killed, but they put him on a boat into a misty lake, and he mysteriously vanished,
Mm.
took away by the Lady of the Lake. And but he said, like Sigmar had said, the at my country's time of greatest need, I will come back.
Right.
So they're the parallels between the two.
I was just reading earlier. It's like 977 years after Sigmar did this.
Yeah,
The Breton did that in Britonia.
yeah,
That's the kind of thing I don't like about the end times, or it was these mysterious things. It's like, is it actually Giles the Breton coming back? And then it's like, yeah, it is in the end times, and it's kind of like, I don't know, that takes away a
I,
lot of it for me.
it does, it does, and I agree with you, but I do like the reveals as well. It's like I like to know, but at the same time, I like the mystery, and I think because they were doing it and they were saying, right, we're wrapping this up now.
Yeah,
All of that kind. It's like with Gotrek and Felix. I won't say what happens in the end,
don't get me started.
but at the end of that, because I love Gotrek and Felix.
Yes.
I read the last book, Slayer, and I think I may have threw it across the room after I was finished.
Yeah, I'm not the only one. Oh my god, I hated
But
that book so much.
yeah,
So,
and
a lot of things about
my,
that book.
one of my puppies actually ripped it up recently, and I wasn't even mad.
Right? Yeah, Kinslayer was okay. A lot of the things that they did in Kinslayer I was pretty okay with, but Slayer was just bad overall, and I hated how
Mm,
it ended. And I was like, what, like 18 or something books for this? Stupid.
yeah,
No, yeah, don't get
I
me
mean,
started. I'll get on a tirade. I'll get real angry.
yeah, that'll be a
My son is
special
named Felix. The books mean
episode.
something to me.
We'll
So,
sit here and rage about the end times and all the bad things that happened.
I mean, we'll do a special episode of that sometime. I don't think people want to hear us just bitch about it. I mean, maybe they do, but I'm gonna assume probably they came here to hear about Britonia, right?
Yeah,
uh, yeah, I always like the idea of the Green Knight. On the tabletop version, he had a mechanic where if you killed him, he would come back on a die roll kind of thing. So you had to kill him multiple times, and he was pretty nasty in his own right.
did he
Um,
have any? Did he have a special sword or anything? Because
yeah,
I
probably.
only know he probably did have something, didn't he? But
I
I
can't
can't,
remember.
like an Excalibur, because that's one thing that I've not in my reading come across. Like you'd think if they're hooving so closely to Camelot and stuff, surely there must be an Excalibur type equivalent in there somewhere. But I didn't know if the Green Knight had it or if you knew anything about it, because I've not come across anything.
No, I mean the closest thing I that pops into my head is the Widowmaker of the High Elves, because it was like in the stone, and then once it was taken out, it would start to corrupt you, kind of thing. But that's about as
Mm.
close as I can think of in Britonia. I mean, magic swords, yeah, pretty much all the main character, like King Lewin, and I'm sure the Green Knight had a magic sword as well. It's just kind of commonplace for those characters, but I can't think of anything Excalibur
Yeah,
direct.
they probably would have called it something like Caliber X or something. Just mix the letters up or something. But
Yeah, why not? That works. Hopefully,
yeah,
somebody can help us when it goes on YouTube. They can
I've said
comment
it.
on it.
I've said it. It's official. It's happening.
Oh, I like
I've
it.
started. I've started.
Sounds good. Uh, but yeah, that's what I had ready to talk about for Britonia. So, um,
We missed out Frog Wives.
oh my God, how did I forget Frogwives?
That was
That
one of
was,
the ones you were most looking forward to.
oh my gosh, the second edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. You just held it up a minute ago. What's that one called? Barony of the Damned.
Yes, Barony of the Damned.
Barony
It's
of the Damned. There was the whole first part of the adventure was moving through Britonia a bit, and you met some frog wives, and they added the career frog wife. And I don't know what it is about it. It just gets me every time. I think it's really funny, and it's kind of, I feel like it's that subtle English picking fun at the French, when it's like the Bretonian peasants. Some of them make their living just by catching frogs because of frog legs being a French dish.
they have the Swamp Hare, which is
Yeah.
a very prestigious. peasant job who goes out into the swamps to catch the snails, frogs, and leeches, no, slugs, who then brings them back to the frog wife, who sits at the frog bucket, deshelling snails and gutting frogs. And that's where they get their food from. The Majority of
So,
peasants get, especially in Mouzalon.
oh, so great. Yeah. We started that adventure one time back in the day because I think I started every adventure second edition came out with for a couple sessions and never finished any of them. But it was that whole imagery to me is just amazing. Where these people, especially the frog wives, just like live in the swamps. Like they spend most of their time just wet in their knees in the swamps catching frogs and then cooking them, and that's about their whole life. And it's just, oh, it's so Warhammer.
This is our French equivalent. French eat frogs, therefore frog wives.
Right? And it's
That's
just
that's how I assume the logic worked there.
that,
That was how the development meeting went.
as an outsider, that seems like the English thinking. Maybe that's a little stereotypical, but
Well, exactly. Plus, bear in mind, we're talking about 20 odd years ago. As a country, we've moved on since then. We keep our sarcasm and stereotyping much more low key these days.
you got to have some sarcasm and whatnot. And there's nothing wrong with picking a little fun at each other. We joke in the Patreon Discord. There's quite a few people in there from the islands, and it's just it's been eye opening in a way to hear what things are happening in the world in different parts of the world. Like, Professional Casual Network, we're based in upstate New York, so we have, our perception of things. We have people in the Discord from places like Virginia and Arizona and Argentina, and then a few in England and a few in places like France or Belgium, even, I think he's from, actually.
Belgium, yeah.
But it's really cool. If it's something you're on the fence about, hop on. Like, you to be part of our
Definitely,
Discord is
definitely.
as little as $1 a month. You get access to the Discord. That's on every level. $5 level and up, you get access to video for all of our shows. Other stuff.
I can recommend it, guys. Trust me.
Bastion is probably
I endorse this.
you might be the most prolific member on there. Maybe except maybe Dagna. He's very active. Let's see, $10 level and up.
I think he's level 19 and I'm level 17. I'm trying to catch him up.
I think he might be higher than that because I just got to level 20 today in the Discord, and I'm been a little behind lately. Let's see, at the $10 level and up, you'll get access to our upcoming Settling the Southlands patron exclusive Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay campaign. That is a blast. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. We recorded some yesterday, and my face hurt from laughing after a while. We also had probably the darkest scene I've ever GM'd yesterday, where we finished the episode and we all just sat there for a minute, just kind of like, wow, that was kind of messed up. And I was like, yeah, it was.
And you were like, I can do better.
Right? I mean,
I can get darker.
I'm writing the adventure, so I was kind of like, I feel a little bad about that, but not really. Which you'll see what that's all about a few months down the road.
Blame the setting, mate. It calls to the dark.
It's what to me. It's just what would it made sense for it to happen. Um, and then our highest tier at the moment is the professional cake sitter tier at $20 and up, where you get everything from the lower tiers. Of course, you also will, if you have something for us to shout out, promote, we will do that monthly on all of our outlets, and you get to have your own dedicated what's it called? A Discord channel to be about whatever you want. We got a couple of ones on there that are fun, just weird stuff that people want.
Heresy is my particular favorite at the moment.
The Heresy channel is pretty amazing, where people just post usually just weird, messed up stuff.
Not necessarily for the faint-hearted.
No, but it's good time. Yeah, so that's what we got for this week. If you're enjoying this, make sure to check everything else from the Professional Casual Network. I mentioned at the start of the show, Mondays we have the Lost Omens podcast, where Danny's running us through the Extinction Curse adventure path in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which I see Bastion over his shoulder, and if you're watching the video, has a map of the inner sea region of Galarian. So if you see that island on the east side of the map.
Oh, this isn't easy to do.
Are you moving a laptop around?
Yeah.
We are currently adventuring on that little island to the north of the big ol' island. We're on the island of Arran, north of the Starstone Isle. Super great time. We just recently recorded a couple more episodes of that the other day, and that's another one that's just so much fun. Oh my gosh, it's the best. It'd have a great. It's nice to not GM one and actually get to play. And it's just some recently the party has kind of turned on my character to where it's like, nah, he'll, it's kind of like they brush him off all the time. He's a little rat person. He's a rat folk, Yosoki, so he gets a lot of crap for
Hold still.
being. Yes, he's a medic, and he's known for not being terribly efficient in combat because he's not meant to be. He's an investigator, and he's also a little rat person that has a negative strength modifier, so he doesn't do a lot of damage most of the time. He has had his moments though. Monday nights here on this Twitch, we've got the Power Phase. We play Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is my current favorite miniatures game that has replaced anything else that we've been playing, mostly because there's not much else we can play at the moment. But our local store, Bearded Dragon Games, is an awesome sponsor and allows us to play there on Monday nights when they're normally closed, so we can kind of relax some rules when it's just people in our little circle, and we have an awesome time playing that great game. Tim and Danny are playing against Taylor, Throwlash Gaming, who's also on the Lost Omens podcast, in a 2-on-1 where Tim and Danny will have a couple of Crises teams against Taylor playing a beefed up Ultron as an ultimate encounter. It's called Different Way to Play that game, which I'm really excited to watch myself. Tuesdays, we've been having, I believe that is actually a regular release again, is our, what's it called? Our Marvel Crisis Protocol, like, vlog series, where the first episode we put up on YouTube, it's called Wait, Did I Roll a Wild? Which is just, we do that all the time. Where the first episode went up last week, where Tim, Big Chuck, and I talked about the Cable release coming up soon, what we knew about his rules and whatnot, and which is kind of like our weekly. This is new in the game world there, and yeah, wait, did I roll a wild? Make sure somebody joined our chat here. Let me know the name because I forgot for a second. And this coming week, where Danny, Chuck, and Tim talked about the new Domino that's coming out with Cable, what we know about what she's going to be doing. I think they talked about a couple different things. I sat that one out to give her a chance for me to watch the kids while they recorded that time. We're probably going to take turns with that. Wednesday is our Patreon day, where we throw out extra content, things like behind the scenes. Big Chuck does he's bringing back his Tasty Treats, where he does little fun reviews of different snack foods and whatnot. He's got his own vlog series with the Big Chuckin' Vlog. I think last week he had his reactions to the new Mortal Kombat movie trailer, because he's a huge Mortal Kombat fan. We have that's where the Settling the Southlands campaign will be coming out in the near future. Great stuff there. Extra content every week. Thursdays is a Grim Podcaster Perilous Adventure. My kind of pride and joy, which I love that show. We're playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition, playing through the Enemy Within campaign, which is just a blast. I think the most recent episode to come out was 41. I think
40 or 40, I can't remember.
Something like
definitely that. Definitely 4 something.
Yeah, 40 or 41, where we are now into the second book, Death on the Reich, which is amazing, and it's just such a great time. We've been improving consistently, I think, as we go through, and overall people seem to really enjoy it. So if you haven't checked it out yet,
Discord, you can try and join in on naming the boat.
Yeah, we gotta finish that up pretty soon. Somehow it came down to like it's not my boat. I'm not the one in it, so we need to figure that out and I think we're gonna have the players kind of vote on names that people suggested, trying to include our awesome patrons. And then Friday is Elite 8 Showdown, with Big Chuck and Tim talking about, anything and everything, whatever they feel like talking about that day, where they can do a little tournament style bracket of 8 subjects, single elimination tournament, where they discuss all kinds of things. Last week was the greatest thing the biggest deal that happened that nobody remembers. I've been listening to that the last couple of days, catching up. My contribution to that was Y2K. Was my idea for that one. Was a huge deal at the time, but I'm sure most, if you talk to a kid about that, they probably have no idea what it even is. Interesting concept there. I like that one. And that brings Saturday's kind of day off at the network, and then Sundays back around to here. And if you're watching this, Grimstream and Perilous Lore comes out on Sundays. So I will say thank you so much for joining me, Bastion. It was a great time.
Thank you for having me.
I learned some stuff too.
I'm sat here thinking now there's so much other stuff that we didn't cover.
Oh yeah, I mean, we could easily do for longevity of the show, we'll do like Britonia Revisited in the future and go into more detail about the different places and things. I'm imagining the first maybe season of the show is kind of overviews of these different places, because like elves, I did all the elves as one episode. We didn't even talk about Athel Loren being like within the boundaries of Britonia and their kind of animosity with the wood elves there.
True.
We definitely talk about that in the future, but love to have you back sometime. And if you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast version on Patreon, let me know what other things you want covered. I have things scheduled out. I believe next week I'm talking about Chaos with patron and friend of the show, Dagna, is coming on to talk about all things Chaos, which I keep thinking, how did I not cover Chaos in general until episode 13? What was I doing? Like, I covered Beastmen in the beginning because they're my favorite, but like Chaos, how'd that get overlooked?
It's a huge topic.
And that'll definitely be one that we'll do an overview of Chaos next week, and then in the future we'll probably do whole episodes about Khorne, and one about Slaanesh, one about Tzeentch, one about Nurgle, that kind of thing, and get into more depth about it. Because with this being weekly, we gotta start general and then get more specific as we go. Otherwise, I'll use up all the topics too soon.
And by season 3, we'll be down to specific character.
We'll do a whole episode about Grom the Paunch.
Yeah, he could fill an episode.
I was trying to think of somebody that has quite a bit of lore about them, but also was just kind of a funny name. I love Grom the Paunch. He's a big fat goblin who invaded Uthlin quite successfully. So we'll save that for another time. But thank you, Bastion, for joining me from across the pond, as they say. Can't wait to see what kind of shenanigans you guys come up with in the Discord going forward. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This has been Grimstream Perilous Lore, so keep gaming. Bye.